James André, is now at the Paris courthouse where that trial is taking place. He joins me from there. James, tell us a bit more about just how implicated François Hollande was in these attacks, not just as the president of the country, but as a spectator of them happening.
Yes, absolutely. François Hollande was very much on the first line that night. First, he was indeed taken as a target in the first wave of this attack, given that 3 bombs were detonated just around the Stade de France, where he was attending a football match where the French team was playing. And then, as the attack unfolded, François Hollande, once he had left the stadium, decided to actually go to the Bataclan with François Molins, who was the Procureur de la République back then, and both men arrived as the situation was unfolding. Now, François Hollande actually wrote in his book that he was shocked by what he discovered, that he was stunned to see the violence, the people wounded, the situation there at the Bataclan itself, and the fact that indeed this attack went on for a few hours. Now, the questions that are going to be asked, of course, is how he lived that moment, but also as a political leader, the president of France at the time, the decisions that were taken, the decisions, for example, when it came to rules of engagement on the night itself, given that, well, there were some police and military personnel close to the Bataclan, but indeed they did not have the right legally to take part to fight the attack in the very first place, but also when it comes to the actual response, when it comes to intelligence and the way the terrorist wave more globally was taken in France, how an attack of this nature could take place 10 months after the attack on Charlie Hebdo, how some of these members of the commando that were actually identified at the time were not stopped before they could attack, or also the fact that, for example, and this we learnt yesterday in this trial, well, the French Interior Intelligence Service, the DGSI, came to speak at the bar and explained that indeed one of the Klein brothers, who were the French voices of the Islamic State group, actually stated that an attack on the Bataclan was being planned. So all this, of course, is going to help understand how this context was managed at the time, and of course what responsibility the French state and security services bear in this case.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of people who want and need answers. But one thing that's interesting is that not everyone who's part of this movement that called François Hollande to the stand actually thinks that he should be there.
Absolutely. Now, he was called up to the stand by a NGO called Life for Paris. It is the largest NGO when it comes to victims of the 13th November attacks. And they wanted to hear François Hollande saying that he had been actually named in this courthouse before by Salah Abdeslam himself, who said that the attacks were in response for French policy out in Syria, and that François Hollande was responsible, but also who say that he needs to shed light on the way things were managed. But some other NGOs say that this is politicizing this trial. That is also what some of the defense lawyers are saying. They say that they don't see how interviewing the president, the former French president, will make any difference in this case. It's also important to note that it's extremely rare for a former French president to be called up as a witness. Indeed, French presidents usually have immunity when it comes to trials against themselves, but it's also quite rare that they actually turn up in courthouses. So this is an important moment when it comes to understanding the 13th of November attacks here in France.
It certainly is. James, thanks for that. France 24, James André.